There is a moment, just after the sun drops below the Kalahari horizon, when the savanna holds its breath. The light dies in layers, first the gold, then the amber, then the deep bruised purple, and in that final minute of dusk, something shifts across the grasslands that scientists are only now beginning to understand. The lions wake up differently than they used to. Not all lions, not everywhere, but across a growing number of territories in sub-Saharan Africa, researchers tracking collared prides have recorded something that has quietly rewritten what we thought we knew about one of the most studied predators on the planet. African lions, animals whose hunting behavior has been documented for over a century, have changed. The way they stalk, the formations they use, the timing of their kills, the roles that different pride members play, all of it has shifted in ways that no behavioral model predicted. And the trigger for this change was not what anyone expected. If you find yourself drawn to stories like this, the ones that happen at the edges of what we know, out in the dark where cameras barely reach, then stay close. There is a great deal more of this to come. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. To understand what changed, you first have to understand what was supposed to be fixed. For decades, the lion was held up as a textbook example of cooperative hunting. The classic model went something like this. Females do the bulk of the hunting. They spread out in a loose formation around prey. The wings move to cut off escape routes while a central cat initiates the charge, and the pride shares the meal according to a strict dominance hierarchy. Males, heavier and more conspicuous, were considered poor hunters by comparison, tolerated at kills they rarely earned. This model was built from thousands of hours of daylight observation across the Serengeti, the Okavango, the Masai Mara. It was published in textbooks. It was taught in universities. It was, everyone agreed, settled science. It was not settled. It was incomplete. The problem was always the darkness. Lions are crepuscular and nocturnal hunters by preference. Studies conducted before the widespread use of GPS collars and thermal imaging relied almost entirely on what human observers could see, and human observers cannot see well at night. The lions that researchers watched during the day were lions performing a small fraction of their actual behavioral repertoire. The nocturnal lion, the real hunting lion, was hidden behind a curtain that technology had not yet pulled back. When that curtain finally moved, what researchers found behind it was staggering. The first serious hints came from a long-term study in Botswana's Okavango Delta in the early 2000s. A team fitting lions with GPS collars capable of recording location data every hour found that the movement patterns of individual pride members at night were far more complex than daytime observation had suggested. Lions were not simply spreading out from a central resting point and reconverging on prey. They were moving in structured sequences, at specific distances from one another, apparently coordinating approaches across several square kilometers of darkness. The question was whether this was genuine coordination or simply the appearance of it. That question took years to answer properly. And when it was answered, the answer opened up a new set of questions that are even harder to resolve. Begin with what the lions are actually hunting after dark, because the prey itself matters enormously to what follows. Across the African lion's range, nighttime prey availability is not a simple scaled-up version of what is available during daylight hours. Different species move into open areas at night, grazing patterns shift. Waterholes that were busy at dusk empty out as the night deepens, then refill in the small hours as different animals approach under cover of darkness. Buffalo herds, which are extraordinarily dangerous prey, move more freely at night and are more spread out. Cape buffalo are responsible for more lion deaths than almost any other prey animal, and yet lions in several study populations have shown a marked increase in buffalo predation after dark over the past 2 decades. This is not incidental. It is a deliberate strategic choice, and it carries real risk. To take an adult buffalo, particularly in darkness where terrain is uncertain and footing unpredictable, requires a level of coordination that exceeds what daylight hunting of zebra or wildebeest demands. A buffalo that turns on its attackers in the dark is not a buffalo the lions can track visually. The sounds, the vibrations through the ground, the smell of blood, these become primary rather than supplementary senses. Lions that hunt buffalo at night are operating in a sensory and tactical environment that is fundamentally different from what classic models described, and the behavioral adaptations that go with it are different too. Here is where the individual role differentiation becomes striking. In several studied prides, researchers using a combination of GPS data, accelerometers embedded in collars, and occasional thermal imaging have identified what can only be described as specialized roles that emerge specifically during nighttime buffalo hunts. These roles are not random. They are not simply the result of whichever cat happens to be closest to the prey. They are consistent across multiple hunts involving the same individuals, and they align with specific physical characteristics and apparent experience levels in ways that have no clear parallel in the daytime hunting literature. There are initiators. These are typically mid-ranking females, not the dominant female as the classic model predicted, who make first contact with the prey, approaching closer than any other pride member before the charge begins. There are flankers who maintain specific angular positions relative to the prey animal, positions that research suggests are optimized not just to cut off escape routes, but to prevent the buffalo from swinging around to use its horns effectively. And there are what researchers have begun calling anchor cats, larger individuals, sometimes including males, who position themselves at the back of the formation and whose role appears to be to catch the prey if it breaks through the primary attack line. Males hunting. That alone would have surprised the researchers who built the classic model. But these are not the same males their predecessors observed, and that observation leads to the deepest layer of this story. The lions that are hunting differently at night are not simply the same lions engaging in new behaviors. In a number of study populations, they are lions that have grown up in conditions that have changed dramatically over the past 30 years. The pressure that reshaped their behavior came from two directions at once, from the expansion of human settlements at the edges of protected areas and from the long-term consequences of prey population shifts. Understanding both of these pressures is essential to understanding why the behavioral change happened and why it was not predicted. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the boundaries between protected areas like the Hwange National Park in Zimbabwe, the Greater Kruger ecosystem in South Africa, and the unfenced reserves of northern Botswana became increasingly porous in one particular direction. Livestock began moving into buffer zones. Human activity extended deeper into transition zones after dark. The consequence for lions was not simply that their habitat was squeezed, it was that their nighttime movement corridor, the routes along which they habitually traveled in darkness, became more dangerous and less predictable. Lions that moved along traditional nighttime routes risked encountering people, dogs, snares set for other animals, or lit areas that compromised their ability to approach prey undetected. In response, some prides began shifting their hunting ranges, not dramatically, not in ways that were immediately visible in daylight survey data, but when GPS collar data was analyzed across multi-year periods, specific prides in the boundary zones showed a consistent westward or inward pull in their nighttime range, moving away from human pressure and into territory where prey species composition was different. In particular, into territory where buffalo were more abundant relative to zebra, wildebeest, and impala. These prides were not choosing buffalo because buffalo was suddenly a preferred prey item. They were being pushed toward buffalo because that was what the available territory had to offer after dark. That pressure created a selection environment. Lions that could effectively hunt buffalo at night survived and reproduced. Lions that could not either abandoned the new territory and compressed into already occupied ranges, creating competitive pressure with other prides, or they died attempting hunts they were not equipped to complete. What emerged over 1.5 to 2 decades was not genetic selection in the classic sense, the timescale is too short for that, but something arguably more remarkable: cultural transmission of a new hunting methodology, passed from experienced individuals to younger pride members, accumulated and refined across multiple generations within the same pride lineage. Cultural transmission in lions. This is a concept that researchers are still wrestling with, partly because acknowledging it changes what the lion is in the scientific imagination. It has long been known that chimpanzees, cetaceans, and certain bird species possess cultural traditions, behaviors that are learned rather than instinctive and passed through social learning. The idea that lions might do the same has been theoretically possible for decades, but the observational evidence was not there. The nighttime hunting data is the closest thing to compelling evidence that has yet been produced. How does cultural transmission work in a lion pride? The pride structure itself provides the mechanism. A typical lion pride consists of a core group of related females, mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, who remain together across years and decades. Young females learn to hunt by accompanying adults on hunts from the time they are as young as 3 months old. They are not contributing meaningfully to kills at this age. They are watching, they are recording, in whatever neural architecture lions possess for this purpose, the sequencing of behaviors they observe in adults around them. As they mature, they begin to participate, initially in minor roles, flushing prey, positioning at the outer edge of formations, before gradually taking on more central functions. If the adults they are learning from have developed a specific nighttime formation strategy for buffalo, the young females will learn that strategy. If a particular technique for approaching a waterhole from downwind in the dark has been refined by the oldest female in the pride through years of trial and error, that technique propagates forward into the next generation, not through genetics but through apprenticeship. The lions are teaching each other, not consciously, not deliberately in the way a human instructor teaches a student, but functionally. The result is the same. And the males? The inclusion of males in coordinated nighttime hunts is perhaps the most disruptive finding of all, because it forces a reconsideration of what males are actually for in a pride's ecology. The standard account held that males were primarily defensive assets. They kept the pride's territory free of rival males, protecting the cubs from infanticide and the hunting females from competition from other prides. Their hunting was opportunistic rather than systematic. A male might take down a prey animal if the opportunity presented itself, but males were not considered reliable or skilled hunters in the way females were. Their size, their manes, their reduced speed relative to females, all of this pointed away from hunting as a primary male function. Nighttime changes the calculation. In darkness, visual conspicuousness matters less. A lion's mane, which reflects enough light to make a male visible across open savanna in daylight, is much less of a disadvantage when approaching prey on a dark night. Male lions are heavier and stronger than females, substantially so. An adult male can weigh over 220 kilograms. In a hunt where the prey is a buffalo weighing 700 or 800 kilograms, the physical mass of a male becomes a genuine asset rather than a liability. The anchor cat function that GPS and accelerometer data has revealed in nighttime buffalo hunts is a function that large males are, anatomically, better suited to perform than any female in the pride. What researchers observed in the Okavango study, over a period of 6 years, was the gradual integration of subadult and adult males into structured nighttime hunts at a rate that increased year on year. The oldest males, coalition partners of the pride's resident males who were permitted access to the pride's females, showed the lowest integration rates, suggesting that the behavior was being learned primarily by younger individuals raised within the pride, rather than imported by incoming adult males. The subadult males who grew up watching the new nighttime formation hunting were adopting roles within it. When they were eventually expelled from the pride and went to seek their own coalitions and their own territories, they carried those behavioral templates with them. This is how a local innovation spreads, not through the territory of a single pride, but across the landscape, as the lions that learned one system of hunting move outward and potentially pass it to new generations in new locations. The speed of this spread, if it is indeed occurring, would explain something that puzzled researchers who were comparing behavioral data from geographically separated populations, similar nighttime hunting patterns appearing in prides that had no known contact with the original study population. Independent discovery of the same strategy is one explanation. Dispersal-mediated cultural spread is another. Researchers are cautious about claiming the latter without stronger evidence, but the pattern is there, and it is difficult to dismiss. There is another dimension to this story that takes it out of the abstract and places it in the physical darkness of the African night, the sensory adaptations that make nighttime hunting viable in ways it may not have been at earlier points in the species' history. Lions have eyes that are well adapted to low-light conditions. The tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer behind the retina that bounces light back through the photoreceptors for a second pass, gives them, in common with most felids, a substantial advantage over their prey in dim conditions. But the extent of this advantage has almost certainly been underestimated. Recent work measuring the visual sensitivity of lions under controlled low-light conditions suggests that they can resolve sufficient detail at moonless night ambient light levels to effectively track prey movement at distances of up to 150 meters. Their prey, buffalo, zebra, wildebeest, have eyes that are not structured to match this performance. The predator sees the prey. The prey does not see the predator. In complete darkness, this advantage erodes, but the African savanna is rarely in complete darkness. There is starlight. There is occasional moonlight even in the darkest lunar phases. And there are the thermal and auditory cues that supplement vision in ways that lions exploit with extraordinary precision. The hearing of a lion is sensitive to a frequency range that picks up the low rumbles and stamp patterns that large bovids produce as they move across dry ground. In still air at night, a lion can locate a moving buffalo by sound alone, at distances that would make a daytime visual approach unnecessary. The olfactory picture is equally rich. A buffalo waterhole that has been visited in the past several hours carries a scent signature that a lion can detect from hundreds of meters downwind. The nighttime hunting landscape, far from being a domain of reduced information, is one where the lion has access to a dense and detailed sensory picture that its prey cannot match. What the new behavioral evidence suggests is that lions have begun to exploit this sensory asymmetry more systematically than before. The formation strategies that GPS data has revealed, the specific angular positioning, the precise timing of the initiator's approach relative to the flanking cat's movement, appear optimized not just visually, but acoustically and olfactorily. The initiator approaches from a direction that keeps the prey's attention focused and masks the sound of the flanking cats moving into position. The flankers maintain spacing that places them outside the arc of the prey's scent detection cone, while staying within the range at which they can hear the initiator's approach. These are not random decisions. They are the product of refined behavioral templates that take full advantage of the lion's sensory superiority in darkness. How does a lion learn this? Not from a textbook, not from instruction in any form that we would recognize. It learns it by doing, by failing, by watching others succeed where it has failed, and by slowly integrating those observations into its own behavioral pattern. The oldest females in the most sophisticated nighttime hunting prides carry within their behavioral repertoire the accumulated learning of potentially dozens of failed and successful buffalo hunts across years or decades. When a young female sits at the outer edge of a nighttime formation for the first time, she is benefiting from that accumulated knowledge without knowing it exists. She simply follows where the experienced cats lead, occupies the position she is maneuvered into by the adults around her, and in doing so, she receives an education that no observation study conducted in daylight could have detected or measured. The implications of this reach beyond lion behavior. They point toward a broader reconsideration of what behavioral flexibility means for large carnivores and what it means for their conservation. For decades, lion conservation has been built around a model of the lion as a behaviorally conservative animal, one whose hunting practices, social structure, and habitat requirements were essentially fixed. Conservation strategies were designed around protecting those fixed requirements: large, unfenced reserves with stable prey populations, minimal human disturbance, and genetic connectivity between populations to prevent inbreeding depression. All of these remain important. But if lions are behaviorally flexible in the deep ways that the nighttime hunting data suggests, then the conservation picture becomes both more hopeful and more complicated. More hopeful because behavioral flexibility means resilience. A population of lions that can modify its hunting strategy in response to changing prey availability, that can integrate new individuals into a refined behavioral system through cultural transmission, and that can exploit sensory advantages that human disturbance does not diminish, is a population with more adaptive capacity than the classic model implied. Lions in fragmented or edge habitats may be more capable of surviving than their population numbers or habitat quality scores suggest, if the behavioral toolkit they carry is sophisticated enough to compensate for reduced territory or altered prey composition. More complicated because behavioral flexibility also means that the consequences of removing key individuals from a pride are more severe than previously understood. In a pride where specific behavioral knowledge, a particular technique for approaching a waterhole at night, a learned pattern for positioning around a buffalo herd in the dark, is held primarily by the oldest females and transmitted to younger animals through their example, the loss of those females is not simply a numerical reduction in the hunting force. It is the loss of an informational repository, a pride that loses its most experienced hunters to poaching, snaring, or retaliatory killing by livestock owners, does not simply hunt less effectively. It may lose access to refined behavioral templates that took years or decades to develop, dropping back to more basic and less successful hunting strategies until new templates are built from scratch. This is not theoretical. Researchers studying the aftermath of retaliatory lion killings at the edges of protected areas have noted that affected prides show not just reduced prey capture rates in the immediate term, which is expected, but altered prey selection patterns that persist for years. Prides that had been specializing in buffalo or other high-value, high-risk prey revert to safer, lower-return prey items like warthog, impala, or smaller bovids. The behavioral specialization that made them effective at nighttime buffalo hunting is gone, because the individuals who carried it are gone and the transmission chain has been broken. This finding has real consequences for how conservationists should think about which lions to protect. The instinctive answer has always been to protect cubs, the future of the population. The evidence from nighttime hunting research suggests that protecting experienced adult females may be at least as important, because those individuals are the carriers of behavioral capital that cannot be replaced simply by allowing the population numbers to recover. You can replace a body. You cannot immediately replace the knowledge that body held. There is a layer of this story that moves even further into uncomfortable territory, because the behavioral changes in nighttime hunting are not occurring in isolation from changes in lion-human interaction patterns that are simultaneously unfolding across the same populations. Lions that have shifted toward nighttime hunting, particularly those that have expanded their nighttime range inward from the edges of human settlement, have in some cases shown a reduction in the avoidance behavior toward humans that lions in more remote populations typically display. This is a subtle and contested observation. It is not that these lions have become aggressive toward humans, or that they have lost their wariness of human presence in general. It is that their tolerance for human-associated disturbance, vehicle noise, distant firelight, the smell of settlements, appears to have decreased, in the sense that they are willing to operate closer to sources of these stimuli than lions in more remote populations are. The mechanism here is probably not mysterious. Lions that have been selecting nighttime hunting ranges partly because of human encroachment pressure have been repeatedly exposed to human-associated stimuli in conditions where the cost of retreat, abandoning the range and losing access to prey, is high. Over time, individuals that maintained hunting behavior despite these stimuli obtained better feeding outcomes than individuals that retreated. The behavioral threshold for human-associated disturbance was effectively raised in the hunting context. These are lions that have, in a limited and specific sense, habituated to the proximity of human activity in darkness because the alternative was not eating. This habituation does not erase the more general wariness that lions display toward humans, and it has not, in the populations studied, been accompanied by an increase in direct conflict. But it represents a boundary condition worth monitoring. Lions that reduce their nighttime avoidance distance from human settlements, that are willing to hunt in areas closer to the perimeter of communities, are lions that have a higher probability of encountering livestock, of being attracted to tethered animals, of being seen at a distance that provokes a defensive killing response. The behavioral flexibility that makes these lions more effective hunters also moves them toward a zone of interaction with humans that carries elevated risk for both. The irony runs deep. The same adaptive behavioral shift that has made certain lion populations more resilient to habitat pressure, more capable of surviving in a fragmented and altered landscape, has also increased the probability of the specific type of conflict that poses the greatest immediate threat to lion survival at the population boundary. Behavioral flexibility in this case is not simply a conservation asset. It is a double-edged adaptation operating in a landscape where the margin for error is extremely thin. What does this mean practically? It means that the buffer zone communities living alongside these adaptive lion populations occupy a position of extraordinary ecological significance that conventional frameworks have not adequately recognized. These communities are not merely bystanders to the behavioral evolution happening in the darkness beyond their fences. They are actors within it. The decisions they make about livestock management at night, about retaliatory killings, about participation in compensation schemes for livestock losses, directly shape the selection environment within which the lions are operating. Communities that effectively contain livestock at night and avoid retaliatory killing allow the behaviorally sophisticated prides to persist and continue developing their nighttime hunting templates. Communities that lose that management capacity create the conditions for exactly the kind of intensified human-lion conflict that erodes tolerance on both sides. There is a reciprocal relationship here that conservation frameworks are beginning to try to articulate, but that is still poorly captured in policy. The lions that hunt at night in new and more sophisticated ways are not a threat to the communities adjacent to their territories in any simple or inevitable sense. They are a population that has adapted under pressure in ways that created new risks alongside new capabilities. Managing those risks requires a level of understanding of what is actually happening in the dark hours, what the lions are doing, how they are doing it, and what drives the specific behaviors that bring them close to human settlement that has not previously been available. The research that is producing this understanding is not separable from the conservation work that needs to follow from it. Science and management are entangled here in ways that make the usual boundaries between them seem artificial. The researchers doing this work operate in conditions that are themselves remarkable, following lions at night in the Okavango, in the Kruger borderlands, in the semi-arid spaces around Hwange, means operating in the same sensory environment where the lions are hunting. The thermal imaging equipment that allows researchers to track formation movements in darkness is extraordinary technology, but it requires proximity. Proximity in the dark to lions that are actively engaged in high-intensity hunting behavior requires a particular kind of commitment. The researchers who have produced the data described here have spent nights parked within a few hundred meters of active lion hunts, watching through thermal scopes as formations shifted across grassland that appeared completely black to the unaided eye. What they describe is not what the textbooks prepared them to see. The formations are looser than expected, and yet the coordination is tighter. Individual cats break from the main group at distances and intervals that seem, when mapped afterward, to have been precisely calculated, but which cannot have been the result of any visible communication between the lions in the moment. There is no audible calling. There is no visible signaling. The coordination is happening through mechanisms that are not yet fully understood, possibly including very low-frequency vocalizations below the threshold of human hearing, possibly including vibrational information transmitted through ground contact, possibly including nothing more than each individual reading the movements of its companions and the prey simultaneously, and acting on an internalized model of how the hunt should develop. That last possibility is the most interesting. It suggests that a lion participating in a nighttime formation hunt carries in its mind something like a predictive model, a set of expectations about where each other participant will be and what they will do, built from experience with those specific individuals in previous hunts. A lion does not simply react to what is in front of it, it anticipates, based on a model of the hunt constructed from familiarity with its pride mate's behavioral tendencies, the ways in which the formation will develop. It occupies not the position that is best given the current state of the hunt, but the position that will be best given the state the hunt is about to reach. This is a cognitive capacity that we have not previously attributed to lions with confidence. The nighttime hunting data implies it. To be clear, implying is not proving. The researchers publishing in this area are careful about overclaiming. The evidence for predictive modeling in lion hunting behavior is strong enough to warrant serious investigation and weak enough that alternatives remain viable. But the direction of the evidence is consistent. And the direction of the evidence is toward a lion that is cognitively more complex than the standard model assumed, operating in a sensory and social environment richer than daytime observation could reveal, and adapting to a changing world in ways that involve something more than simple trial and error. This is the portrait that emerges from the darkness. Not a static predator executing a fixed behavioral program refined over millions of years of evolution, but a dynamic animal embedded in a social network of knowledge and experience, capable of modifying its behavior across timescales shorter than a generation in response to the specific pressures it faces. A learner, a transmitter of learned patterns, an animal whose relationship with its prey, its habitat, and the humans who share that habitat is not fixed, but in motion. The night hunt is the window through which this portrait becomes visible. Everything that was true of the lion before the thermal cameras and GPS collars captured what happened in the dark is still true. The family structure, the territorial behavior, the roaring at dawn that reasserts presence across the grassland. But the layer underneath that, the layer that only emerges in darkness, is more elaborate than anyone had imagined, and it is still changing. There is a place in the northern Botswana study area where the researchers have been returning for 6 years. A floodplain edge where a particular pride with 11 individuals, 8 females across 3 generations, 2 subadult males, and a single large adult male who joined the Pride Coalition 3 years ago, hunts regularly after midnight. In the first year of the study, this pride hunted primarily zebra and impala. They took buffalo occasionally. In the wet season, when reduced visibility in tall grass gave them a positional advantage they could not achieve on open ground. By the 3rd year, their buffalo kill rate had increased significantly. By the 6th year, buffalo constituted roughly 40% of their kills, the majority occurring between midnight and 3 in the morning, and the formation structures observed during these hunts were markedly more complex than anything recorded in the pride's behavior during the first year. The oldest female in this pride was estimated to be 13 years old at the study's beginning. She is 19 now. In lion terms, she is old. She moves more slowly on the approach than the younger females. She occupies increasingly a central directing position in the formation rather than a peripheral one. Not because the researchers can demonstrate intentional direction, but because the other individual's movement patterns consistently orient relative to her position in a way that they do not orient relative to any other individual. When she stops, the formation pauses. When she moves, the formation moves. She is not simply the dominant female in a dominance hierarchy sense. She is something closer to an informational center around which the hunt is organized. No one predicted this. No model of lion hunting behavior that existed before the thermal cameras went out into the dark anticipated the degree to which individual experiential knowledge would prove to be structurally central to the operation of a nighttime hunt. The classic model distributed function across the formation fairly evenly, with dominance affecting feeding priority after the kill, but not hunt organization itself. What the Okavango data shows is that hunt organization, the sequencing of approaches, the timing of commitments, the adjustment of angular positions relative to prey movement, is not distributed evenly at all. It is concentrated in the oldest experienced individuals, and it flows outward from them through the formation in ways that the younger animals have learned to read and follow. When that older female eventually dies, what happens to the pride's hunting capability is one of the questions the research team most wants to answer. It will be a natural experiment in informational loss that no ethical research design could deliberately create. The answer, whatever it turns out to be, will be one of the most valuable data points in the entire study. Alongside the behavioral research, a parallel line of investigation is examining what the physiological costs of this shift toward nighttime buffalo hunting actually are. Buffalo are not just difficult to kill, they are dangerous. A pride that hunts buffalo regularly does not do so without injury. Claw wounds, horn punctures, fractures from impact with the massive bovid's forequarters. These are part of the price of the strategy. Medical records from lions captured for collar replacement or veterinary assessment in the study populations show elevated rates of healed wounds consistent with buffalo contact compared with lions in populations that hunt predominantly smaller prey. Some of these wounds are significant. A lion with a deep horn puncture to the shoulder must hunt through that injury or not eat. A formation that loses an effective participant to injury must restructure its approach. The remarkable finding is that the injury rate, while elevated, has not produced population-level health consequences in the studied prides that offset the nutritional advantages of buffalo hunting. The caloric return from a single buffalo is substantially higher than from an equivalent effort directed at zebra or wildebeest. A pride that kills one adult buffalo can feed for 2 to 3 days with minimal additional hunting effort. In conditions where prey is scattered and hunting requires substantial travel, the efficiency gain from buffalo hunting more than compensates for the injury cost, provided the hunting technique is good enough to keep injury rates within tolerable limits. And the nighttime formation strategies that the experienced prides have developed appear, based on the available data, to be doing exactly that. Injury rates in the most sophisticated nighttime buffalo hunting prides are lower than in prides attempting buffalo hunts with less developed formation techniques. Skill reduces risk. Knowledge protects the hunter. This is an elegant demonstration of why cultural transmission of behavioral knowledge matters for survival in ways that go beyond simple prey acquisition. It is not just that a pride with better nighttime hunting technique kills more buffalo. It is that a pride with better nighttime hunting technique kills more buffalo while sustaining fewer injuries. The informational capital that the older females hold translates directly into health and survival benefits for the entire pride. Protecting those individuals is protecting the pride's capacity to feed itself safely for years into the future. The moon over the Okavango is rising now, a thin crescent that adds just enough light to the dry season floodplain to catch the white patches on the flanks of a distant buffalo herd. The herd is moving slowly, grazing in the direction of a water channel 3 kilometers to the north. Somewhere in the knee-high grass between the channel and the herd's current position, a pride of lions has been moving for 40 minutes, in a configuration that thermal imaging will later show to have been a textbook example of the new nighttime approach strategy. Flanks at 30-degree angles to the prey's direction of travel, initiator trailing 20 meters behind the central axis, anchor position filled by the adult male moving in a parallel track 200 meters to the south. The buffalo do not know the lions are there. They cannot see them, cannot hear them over the sound of their own movement, cannot smell them because the wind is running perfectly wrong for the prey and perfectly right for the hunters. The formation is holding. The oldest female is at its center. She has done this many times before in this same floodplain, against this same herd or herds very like it, and the shape of the hunt she has built around her tonight reflects all of that experience accumulated in darkness across years that no researcher was there to count. This is what was hidden. This is what the daytime observation could not see. Not a simple predator running down simpler prey across open savanna in a way that any camera could capture, but something more layered and more alive, a society of hunters refining its knowledge in the dark, transmitting it forward through time, adapting to a world that keeps changing in ways that no species was designed to handle, but that some species, it turns out, have the cognitive and social architecture to meet. The buffalo herd does not know what is coming, but the lions do, and they have learned it from each other. The hunt begins, the grass moves, the night does what the night does. And in the morning, when the light comes back and the researchers review the collar data and the thermal footage, they will find what they have been finding for 6 years running, a pattern of behavior more complex and more capable than the science predicted, carried out by animals in darkness, in conditions that remain difficult to observe and impossible to fully replicate. They will add it to a growing body of evidence that is quietly dismantling the textbook picture of what a lion is. The story of the African lion is not finished. It is not even close to finished. The animal that humans have watched longer and more thoroughly than almost any other wild predator on Earth turns out, in the hours when human eyes are closed, to be doing something that none of those watching eyes had seen. And the implications of what it is doing ripple outward, through conservation policy, through our understanding of animal cognition, through the way we think about what knowledge is and how it survives across generations, in species that have no written language, no institutions, nothing but the transmission of behavior from one body to the next in the darkness of an African night. That is a story worth following all the way to its end. Hit subscribe if you want to be there when the next layer of it comes open. The lions are not done surprising us, not by a long way.